Good morning, everybody. This is Walk the Dog, Season 2, Episode 28, Take 2. I had recorded an episode last week that was supposed to go live on Thursday, and after uploading it and checking it, I found it had no audio, which was very depressing. So I've double checked this time. I made sure it wasn't like the mic broke or anything. So it should get audio this time. If this somehow doesn't work, I'll probably just end the thing and never make a public appearance ever again in shame. But to make it up for you guys, because I know that means I missed 2 episodes last week because of that day, and then frankly I was in a rut and I needed the day off. So I'm back though, and to make up for you, I brought 6 questions that I'll answer, and I will go as long as it takes to get through all 6 questions. So if this episode ends up being a little extra long, cool, you can enjoy. As far as updates go, Monday morning meta report went out. TLDR is meta is getting pretty solid. That being said, there's one thing that I think could make this set a lot better. It was really obvious in hindsight. I don't want to say what it is though, because I think we might just do it for the for fun patch, which will be pretty advantageous. But you know, it's definitely one of those things where I wish I had infinite time and resources because I don't know. I really like this set, and I think there's more that can be done with it and things like that. Who knows? Maybe someday, a couple of years down the road, it will be a cool revival or something. But, you know, I don't know. I like this set a lot. Still feels like there are things we could have improved upon. Cough, cough, 3 costs. But overall, I've been having fun. Like I said, I think I'm down like 300 LP, but that's mostly because I was forcing a lot of 3-cost reroll. Just to like really understand like why it works, why it doesn't, from trying to play from certain spots and really understand it. Like even today, actually, this morning I played a game where I played Echo reroll, and someone in the lobby was like, "Oh look, Mort's playing reroll," but what they didn't realize is I had 5 lesser duplicators. I had 2 augments that gave me 4, plus I dropped 1, so I never actually rerolled. I just grabbed echoes along the way, and like in that situation, it should be really, really good, So, and it was. I got second that game, so only losing to a Baron 2. So, but yeah. Anyway, so I'm back. Let's answer questions. Let's talk TFT, and hopefully, you guys are all doing great. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm in a funk, but it seems like things have been quiet. So, which is probably good. I don't know. Hard to tell. Okay, so I'm going to answer these questions. Like I said, there's some good ones today. The first one is, what are your thoughts on Wound as a mechanic? So, I think Wound is one of those things that's been around since set 1. And for those who remember all the way back in set 1, it was 50%, but it was bugged to apply twice. So it was actually 75%. And so when we started set 1, Wound was a 75% heal reduction and has gone all the way down to right now it's 33% heal reduction. But yet still feels insanely necessary. It feels like you have to have Wound. If you ask any of the challenger players, they'll say you need to have Wound from something, Sunfire, Red Buff, Morello, to get that out there. But here's what I'll say. I do not, right now, if you put a gun to my head and said, make a decision, I would delete Wound from the game. And the reason for that is that it doesn't actually add anything interesting right now. It's mostly just a checkbox of things that you need to have. It's like you need to have Shred and Sunder, you need to have Wound. And that's how players perceive it. They don't really look at it as like some tech option or anything like that. The other thing is that right now, a lot of what Wound does is invisible. It's not really appreciable. It's like certain tanks just get disabled by it really hard. Like you're trying to run Darius tank, you're just 33% less effective. Cool, I guess. But other tanks don't have this problem. It's not like Wukong's, spell or Garen's spell, or funny, I use these examples. Wukong's gets lowered a bit by Shred and Sunder. Garen does have healing on it, but that's only a part of their spell, right? I think a better example here is Loris. Like, nothing in Loris's spell gets reduced, but Darius does because he has healing on it. The other thing is that, like, I think when Wound was introduced, it was in a world where there were going to be a lot more supportive, like, Healy champs, and the theory was like, oh, if they have a Sona on their team, well, you could tech in Wound to counter the healing. But as we've learned over time for TFT, healing as like a primary output isn't really that healthy for TFT anyway. And so if you're teching it in for something that doesn't exist, then really you're just kind of neutering certain tanks, I guess, or Gunblade. Like, if you want to have a cool Gunblade build, I guess that gets hit. But again, since everyone sort of auto default has it anyway, you're sort of balancing all healing around the fact that they have it, which then inflates the healing. So I don't know. Like I said, there's something about variety, right? Where it's like, if you tell me we want to have wound in the game just for like a variety of like small things, sure. But then maybe, like, dumb example here, and I'm just making this up. This isn't something we're actually doing. But if you tell me there's a 10% wound that we can just put for flavor on like Misfortune, and it's like, oh, cool, she lowers the healing a little bit. That's neat. And it's not really something you're supposed to appreciate, then that's fine. It's just another essentially damage amplification for your team in a flavorful way, and that's fine. And then we could add one for like, shield reduction, 10% or something like that. Sure. And again, that's just flavorful, damage amp essentially for your team. But this also leads into, a whole other thing that right now I'm struggling with the meta, which is just that the 4-cost tanks and their high amounts of damage reduction built in are sort of dominating right now. And so like the fact that, Garen tank with 7 Demacia compared to a Mundo 3 is kind of laughable, or even a Darius 3, right? Like, they just don't compare, because it turns out healing yourself for 500 is a lot less effective than, having 50% of all damage taken reduced for 4 seconds. That just provides so much more effective health. So I'm getting a little off topic, but yeah, like I said, this is my hot take, is that wound, if I could snap my fingers today, I would probably either lower all the way down to like 10% and make it flavorful, or I would even just remove. Now, I'm not a big fan of removing content right now, just because, having more things to add on to champions to give them flavor is fun. So I think I'd go the 10% route. But again, that's with infinite time and resources. Is this really the big thing I should have like the live team spend a bunch of time on right now? Probably not, right? I mean, do you want wound rebalance, or do you want set 17 to launch in a better state, or do you want, So it's just one of those things that, like, maybe someday, but for now, it is what it is. So that's kind of my 2 cents on wound. Cool. All right. Next question. Why is gold capped at 50 gold? Have you tested uncapped? So why is gold capped at 50? The honest answer is because that's what Auto Chess had when the game launched, and we emulated that and built around that, and that's what it started as. I say that as somebody who wasn't on the original building team. When I joined, 50 gold was already the cap, and maps were being built with the 5 gold nodes and things like that. So that is why it started at 50 gold. Now, have we tested uncapped? Really, when thinking about this system as a designer, you need to think about both ends of the spectrum, right? So let's take it to the extremes here. First, you mentioned uncapped. Well, the other end of the extreme would be you can't gain interest, right? And then in the middle of that would be, what about something like 70 gold cap? And what about something like 30 gold cap, right? So we have, again, no interest generated, max 3, max 5, max 7, and no limit to max. Those are kind of our different possibilities here. Well, the good news is we've already tested a bunch of these. As far as no interest goes, we've tested that. It was called Hyperroll. We know what that does. We've actually also got that in a couple augments, so you can experience what the game is like with no interest. And what it's like is you basically just mad level, spend all your gold every turn. There's not really a lot of depth to it. There's not really a lot of purpose to saving up. And it becomes a very lack of depth decision-making process of the game. You just always spend your gold every turn, no problem, right? So that's not great. 30 gold, we have not personally tested, but Underlords actually did. Underlords for a while actually lowered their interest cap from 50 to 30, and I found similar results as the zero interest, which is everyone got to 30, and then because 30 was pretty easy to maintain, you just stayed at 30 no matter what. And I know some of you are thinking, well, isn't that true of 50? Well, no, 50 actually, there is some depth about like when do you spend, when do you drop to 40. I remember, when Raptor coached me during set 15 or set 14, whichever set it was, and it was like, oh, on 3-5, go down to 40, but level up. It's worth it to lose an interest to be an extra level. There's actually some interesting decisions around 50 gold, but 30 gold there wasn't. 30 gold, it was literally just always spend, above 30. So that's not great. Now, what about 70 gold? 70 gold we've tested, and there's an augment in the game that does that right now. We've had a couple before, and it's fine. It just really the game doesn't go long enough. So what happens is you only really go to 70 if you're like pure lost streaking and pure econ, but it doesn't really change that much. So then there's the uncapped. Now we did test this. Some of you may remember. I think it was on PBE. If it wasn't, it was only during dev. But I swear this went to PBE at some point. But Hedge Fund, when it first came out, or at least was first in development, was uncapped interest. And what it did was really, really toxic. It creates a situation where if you can't win your first combat, it is optimal to open fort, to build as much econ as possible, because, let's say you get up to like 110, getting 11 gold a turn is a lot better than 5 gold a turn, and you can reach a lot higher caps than other players. And then when that's true, the more players that do that, the better that strategy becomes, right? So like, let's say literally 4 players in the lobby all decide to open fort to do this. What happens is you have 4 players in the lobby who are, taking less damage when they fight each other, and then they still have like 30 health on 4-2, but they've generated an extra, 40, 50 gold on top of everybody else, and it becomes too dominant of a strategy. And so, like I said, I'm pretty sure that augment actually went to PvE, and that's what we found. It was just these really toxic experiences. So have we tested uncapped? Yes. Now, all of this is to say that is 50 the perfect number? Maybe not. Maybe it was supposed to be 60. Maybe it was supposed to be 40. I don't know. We've never tested every exact number. But the other thing is, let's pretend for a minute that actually 60 is better than 50, right? In order to do that, we would have to change every single map, because right now they all have those 5 gold nodes to have 6. Is it worth having our artists spend time to change every single map so that you can generate 1 extra gold? Probably not, right? Like, even under the assumption it is better, the question is how much better? How much better does it make the game? A little? Sure, but is that worth, altering the entire paradigm of the map for? Probably not. And so all this is to say that we'll probably keep experimenting with ways to change your interest like we have with augments and stuff. But overall, I don't see a lot of value in changing this. But we have tested uncapped, and it was very, very bad. So that is why gold is currently capped at 50. We believe it offers the most skill expression around like the temptation to hold for as long as possible, but also to spend. There's a nice, good push and pull relationship between those two incentives. So, yeah. Now, again, is that perfect? Probably not, but that's where we are for now, and probably won't change anytime soon. So, cool. All right. Next up, we have, what do you think of the cost of pivoting? Do you think it's where it should be? Ooh, so this is a fun topic. This is a really interesting topic, and something Nico has actually been talking about as well with me a little bit. He had a whole write-up on his thoughts as a player. But before I tell you my answer, I think we need to define what pivoting is and if it even still exists in TFT, okay? When we define a pivot, I think a lot of people, when they hear pivoting, they picture the old 4-2 roll down where you would like play whatever you hit and things like that, or change your entire board. And some of that still technically exists, right? Like, for example, the first patch of the set, when people would play Yordle, and they would use Yordle to sort of stabilize and build some econ, and go 8 Yordle to fast 9, and then sell their entire board into legendaries, right? Is that pivoting? I mean, again, by old technicalities, yes, but would I define that as pivoting? No, right? And so, because to me, pivoting is, I believe I am looking at a certain situation, and I believe these are the places I could go, but new information has appeared, which is causing me to change my mind. Like that is going to be my definition of pivot here. So an example here would be, hey, if I build a Ginsu's, right? Well, I'm probably thinking something like Yunara or Kaisa as potential options, right? And so if I happen to drop an early Rek'Sai, is that pivoting? No, not really. But maybe as I'm working my way towards my Yunara board, and I have like 5 Ionia, and I've built a Ginsu's and maybe an IE, and then I hit a Kindred, is that pivoting? A little, right? Like, okay, maybe now instead of Yunara, I'm going this, and I can build around that slightly, but that's only a light pivot. But what would it take you to do like a heavy pivot, right? And this is where, like, is there any world where if you've built a Ginsu's and an IE, you're going to pivot into that 2-star Lux you hit? No, there isn't, right? Like, that's just not how the game works anymore. And so the cost of making a pivot like that is pretty high. In fact, literally the game I was talking about today where I played the Echo game, someone in my lobby, I don't know how they did it. It wasn't an augment. It wasn't Recombobulator. But they hit Yunara 2 on 3-2. A very big high roll, right? Except they'd already built in a Shojin's. And so they put the Shojin's on Yunara. And then later were complaining. They were like, oh, yep, I got baited by this Yunara, right? And hitting a 3-2 Yunara should not be bait. That feels pretty bad. But it was bait because they'd already built that Shojin's. They didn't have the items. And later they were complaining. They're like, I didn't get any bows. So trying to play Yunara without any bows is pretty tough. As we all know, she needs at least Ginsu's and IE, and sometimes even the Titans, So all of this is to say is, what do I think of the cost of pivoting right now? I think it's too high. I think items in particular right now are limiting your ability to go, ooh, let me change my mind, right? Again, if you build a Ginsu's and an IE and you drop a Fiddlesticks, can you play that Fiddlesticks? Yeah, for sure, right? Like it's good utility and you will adapt to that drop, but will that cause you to change to a Vanquisher line? No, because, your Ambessa isn't really going to use the Ginsu and the IE very well. And so I don't know, there's probably some like deeper fundamental work to do there. But again, we have to talk about change aversion. Right now, items define your builds and your potential build paths in a way that provide guardrails, but they also limit the ability to make those pivots based around new information. And that's not to say that there aren't ways to pivot, right? Augments can do this. You can get things like Dumbify or Restart Mission that cause you to change your path and things like that. But overall, the question was, what do I think of the cost of pivoting? I think it's too high. And do you think it's where it should be? No. I think the best TFT is you reacting to the information that you get as you go. And I think right now between items and to some extent some of the unlocks, right? Like, let's say you looked at that Ginsu's and IE and were like, ooh, I could also consider Volibear because I dropped a 2-star Braum. But even just getting the Volibear, you need a lot of health items to make sure that you can even have access to the Volibear. So that's another barrier to pivoting. So no, I don't think it's where it should be. I think there's even more we can do here to improve the game. I think Lore and Legends was a step in the right direction, a very, very healthy, good step in the right direction. But I think we still have room to go. So that's my 2 cents. Cool. All right. Next question. Why does every set have a 4-cost AoE CC champ? These champs always end up being very popular. Players always fight over them. And if you're trying to play around them, like let's say you're trying to play Noxus right now and everyone's got Swain on their board, you are unable to play them, and that feels really bad. So why does every set have one? Okay, so one of the big things, the dirty secrets of TFT, is whenever we're doing a set design of new champs and traits and things like that, coming up with carries is pretty easy, right? It's like take the spell that they do in League of Legends, and it turns out a lot of spells in League of Legends do damage. Crazy, I know. And, whether you be a low mana single target or a high mana AoE or, middle mana but you hit 3 or 4 targets, right? Like you know all the damage paradigms, all the shapes, lines, but we have enough variety that we can fill out a roster pretty well and have some great variety, right? Does Kaisa and Yunara feel the same even though they both use Ginsus? Nah, they feel different, right? Kaisa has that like big punch and is very front to back, whereas Yunara has the like true damage and can tickle the back a little bit, you know? So even within that, there's a lot of variation. Tanks, however, tanks are something we've struggled with. Tanks, really, there is two successful paradigms that we can use all the time, which is I shield myself a bunch and then hit really hard back, or I heal myself and then hit really hard back. Those are basically the two shield spells that work, right? And you can see this with every, especially 1 to 3 cost tank, but really just in general. It's like, what does Alawi do? She heals herself and then hits really hard. Cool. What does Shen do? He shields himself and then hits really hard. Cool. What does Nautilus do? Shields himself, and then while he's shielded, he hits really hard. Yep. And this leads our design team to sort of be like, these are boring. How do we make non-boring tanks? I've even talked to Medler about this, and Medler is like, why is every tank boring? And he's not wrong, right? Well, one of the other things we can do, because again, the purpose of a tank is to slow down combat, right? Like your job as a tank is to absorb damage so that the damage doesn't go into the tank and slows down combat so your carry can do their thing. The only other way we know of to slow down combat other than shield and heal and gain windows of armor MRDR, Wukong, Garen, stuff like that, is CC, right? It's providing crowd control effects that slow combat down. And so that is an effect that we believe is good for the game and healthy because it slows down combat in a unique way. The problem is you can only have so many of these, right? Whereas if every tank shielded and healed, it's fine, no problem. But if every 4-cost tank had a CC, well then, guess what? No one's moving, ever. And we've made this mistake before. We've had sets with 2 AoE CCs, and it gets really bad. Or even during development, sometimes you'll see it, guys, where we have 3 CC tanks, but we find lines that can play 2 or 3 of them together, right? Like, thankfully, right now, you don't see a lot of Swain and Cho'Gath, but sometimes you do, and when you do, it's like, holy, try being a melee champion when both of those are around. It's awful. So basically, we believe CC is good to have in the game on tanks to help slow down fights, but we can only have so many. And so we generally always reserve one spot in the 4-cost that this is the CC tank. We're going to have it. It's healthy, it exists. We need one. Now, the question is, we need to be really careful about who gets it, right? Because one of the things that I think, I'm going to go back all the way to set 4. Set 4 Sejuani, I think, did this the best because she was Fortune, which meant, okay, sure, you could throw her in Fortune, but realistically, if you weren't in Fortune, the Origin was doing nothing. And then she was like Brawler, I think, or Vanguard or something. It was like, and this was before those gave a team-wide buff, so it was just like, yeah, she's a slightly less good tank that doesn't help your traits, but you get the CC. Whereas I think we've also done this poorly sometimes, where you're going to have to forgive me, I forget which set it was, but like Jarvan having this and being a strategist, and strategist being this really good team-wide aura. And so it's like, well, yeah, I'll take a team-wide aura and a 4-cost CC. That sounds great, right? With Swain, it's Arcanist. I'll take 18 AP for my team and an AoE CC. Yes, please. And it pairs well with Juggernaut, which means I can play it with Shyvana. Great. Or I can just play it with, Nico and get Arcanist and Defender. Great. Like, Swain gives you access to so much team-wide utility. He probably should not have had the 4-cost AoE CC spell, right? And so, dumb example, but if you told me Skarner, instead of his armor Oro, he was the AoE CC character, maybe. Though it's funny because Skarner does actually provide CC, it's just more concentrated into 3 units. Because again, trying to make unique outputs. So that's why every set has a 4-cost CC champion. Again, should it have been Swain? Probably not this set. But should it have been Garen? Also probably not. So it's always a challenge. But I do still believe, and I can tell you that like the next 3 sets are all probably going to have a 4-cost AoE CC champion. It's a staple of TFT. It's just up to us to figure out what the right spot is for that. So, yeah. All right. 4 questions down, 2 to go. This one's easy. League gives recommended items based on what people are building. Why not do that instead of class? So I've actually talked about this a little bit. I think this came up on my Walk the Dog where I had Peter on. I think so, if I remember correctly. But the short answer here is we actually should just do this, probably. We do believe that, like, is it really in our best interest to lie to you about which items should be built on Yunara? Or should we just tell you it's Ginsu's IE and Titans? The short answer is it probably should just tell you. The reason I had been hesitant way back in the day was there's a bit of self-fulfilling fantasy, or self-fulfilling prophecy that kicks in here. Not fantasy. Self-fulfilling prophecy here, which is if you tell everyone to build Ginsu's IE and Titans on Yunara, well then guess what? They're all going to build Ginsu's Titans IE and Yunara. And will we discover anything better? No. And so what will the data pull? It'll pull exactly those, right? Like, we can only get good variety right now because players experiment. And if we tell you the exact 3 items you should be building, then there's going to be less experimentation. In addition, I think, let's say we told you Ginsu's IE Deathblade, okay? And then later, Dish Soap figures out that actually it's supposed to be Titans, Then there's going to be a lot of like, well, why won't the system change? Why is the system lying to you, right? So there's going to be the expectation that this system is essentially perfect. And so for me, it was like, hey, we should leave the puzzle open for players to figure out and explore and determine what's good so that they can find innovations, right? Like when people figured out Titans on Yunara and they're like, wait, this AP ratio is actually good, that's a pretty neat skill expression. Again, I've talked about the unintuitiveness of it I don't like, but as far as skill expression, like that's pretty cool, But does it make the game less accessible? Yeah. I mean, by definition, less accessibility, less depth, it's a trade-off. So it's a tough one. All of this is to say, though, I do believe that if I have to, like, again, gun to my head, make a decision which one's better for the game, I think just saying, hey, look, here are some of the items you should probably be building is a good way to go. So, yeah, the short answer is I kind of agree with you. So, okay, last question. Are there any core TFT rules you think are off limits to change, even for experimentation? So I thought a lot about this question, and my original answer was going to be no, because we should always be trying to challenge assumptions, right? The unlock system was us challenging the assumption that there should be 60 champions in a set, and how could we make that not true, right? Some of the best innovations will be from challenging core assumptions. I believe we should be challenging the econ system because it's a pretty solved system. Someday we should figure out if there's a way to make a deeper, more meaningful system there. But as I thought about it, there was one system I believe that TFT has that is probably as elegant as it can be, and I would not change at this point. Now, I might be wrong on this, but I'm going to give you my answer here. I believe the item system, the core item system, which is component A plus component B equals an item, is extremely elegant. It provides a very clear rule. If you compare it to a lot of the other ones from the early auto chess was like nonsense. It'd be like, this component only leads to this other thing, and it only when merged with these other 3. Otherwise, it does nothing. And if you don't drop, it was a nightmare. We know we can do simpler, which is artifacts, right? We could literally just be like, pick your full item. Like, imagine instead of components, we just dropped you a full item anvil and said, pick an item. Like, we can do that, but it's a lot less interesting, right? Like, if you have an anvil of 5 choices, it can be 5 things. If I drop you a tier, all of a sudden it can be 8 things. It can be potential. There's decision making around holding it versus slamming. Like, it's just such a rich system. But it's also intuitive, right? Which is, again, item A plus item B always equals a thing. a common question I always get is like, have you considered items that took 3 components to build? And it's like, well, no, because it's really complicated and would create this like, you have to have like a confirm menu each time you build an item. It's just really awkward. So, shout outs to Brad, the original pioneer of the item system of TFT. But I believe strongly that that's a system that if you put a gun to my head and said you have to innovate on it, I don't know that I could. I don't know that I could come up with something much better. I think I could come up with things that are simpler, but not better. So, yeah, that's my 2 cents. All right. That's going to do it for me now. I got through this pretty quick. Actually, a pretty normal length episode, so I got through this pretty quick. Hopefully, you guys are having a good week. Just doing work in Futureland, things like that. Things are good here. Sometime I'll have to tell you about Riftbound. I went to a Riftbound pre-release. That was a lot of fun. But yeah, cool. All right. Again, these will start kicking off and continuing on for a while, so hopefully you guys enjoy these. And thanks for sticking around. All right. That's going to do it for me. Until next time, take it easy.